Debbie McCoy's condo complex has crumbling foundations. She's been pushing for testing for years and says this is a necessity.
Once we learn what the threshold is for how much is too much, then we can free up all those homes and they no longer have the stigma, having trace amounts of peritite. Hi, I'm Debbie McCoy, the Concrete Queen of Connecticut, and I'm here today with Massachusetts homeowners Russell Dupere, Heidi Hammer, and Nick Hany is a contractor that's done work in Connecticut as well as Massachusetts. We're going to discuss today some of the issues the homeowners have been facing for going on 8 years now, and although they have passed quarry standards, they still haven't passed the financial aid remediation package program. So I'm going to start with Russell Dupere. As you can see in front, there's a timeline of the past 8 years, and it's brief. I have an 8-page timeline here that illustrates everything that the homeowners have been through to raise awareness. Russell? Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved.
We noticed there was crumbling in some of the walls.
Russell Dupere of Longmeadow, Massachusetts, says he had no idea he had a problem with his basement until he had to gut paneling and drywall after a hot water heater leak. He had engineers visually inspect it.
So I'm a homeowner in Longmeadow, Massachusetts. We bought the house, several years ago, and you want me to tell you about how we learned of the concrete problem?
Well, it says the house was built in 1990, so you weren't the first homeowners?
We didn't build the house, yeah. We bought it from the first homeowner who did build it.
Okay.
And so we were the second owners of the house.
So when you say you bought it from them, you had a home inspection, and at that point, it didn't have crumbling foundation?
Well,
any notice?
At that point, they really weren't testing or doing anything in Massachusetts because nobody knew it was in Massachusetts. But also, it had a fully finished basement, and the house has brick all the way down to the ground outside. So there really wouldn't be a way to see it visually anyway.
Okay.
And at that time, nobody thought it was in Massachusetts.
And you weren't looking for it. You didn't have a foundation inspection. You probably had the usual home inspection.
Yeah.
And so in my timeline, I see here, well, first off, 2016, Bill and Pam Johnson spoke about their situation. Their home was built in the early 1980s, and by late 1990, they had spider cracking, horizontal cracking, and they didn't know what was causing it. And so they brought in local and state officials. They brought in the building department, and assorted contractors. And no one in the late 1990s knew what it was. So they built a second inner wall, and that's not going to work when they go to sell it, because now they've tested it and they know they have peritite, and they know their home foundation was poured from Modus. And then in December 5th, 2017, that's when public awareness came about, because similar to Connecticut, Linda Tofolowski noticed cracking in 1995, and she reported it to Modus and to her contractor, and then she reported it to state officials in 2001, DCP, and then in 2002 to the Attorney General, and then in 2003 they had a large meeting. Again, by 2008, Don Chaudhry reported it, but it wasn't until 2015 when George Colley did a story on it that public awareness became known here in Connecticut. Now, in your situation, Bill and Pam Johnson are similar to Linda, and you're similar to the breaking story in 2017. So your story happened exactly 2 years after our story happened, and you're still trying to get a remediation scheme.
Yes, we are.
And you also repaired the home, Russell, at your own expense. And from
Yes.
the research I did, I think you spent like $330,000.
Probably with landscaping and everything, it's probably more like 350. Plus, I had to rent a home for 4 months,
Yeah.
so I
yeah.
would say it's closer to 350 altogether.
Wow, that's a lot.
Now we have a situation where the insurance companies deny the claim that we made. The approximate cost is $350,000 to fix the basement.
Yeah.
That is a real lot. And then we have Heidi Hammer here, and they did an interview with Heidi in March 12th of 2018.
We found out that our foundation is a crumbling foundation, that it was poured from JJ Modis, and it has pyrite, and it is crumbling.
And you explained your home was built 1994 in Wales. And when did you notice the cracking? I mean, you did an interview in 2018, so you must have noticed the cracking prior to that. Was it off of the raising public awareness, like Russell is the start, of
Actually,
speaking about it?
we noticed the cracking probably around 2012, and my husband filled all the cracks, and they came back. And because we live so close to Connecticut, we always watch the Connecticut news.
Okay.
And that's when we were seeing they were having an awareness.
July
Yes.
2015 when they
Yes.
reported about it.
Yes.
It kind of went like,
And because we built our house, we knew, we have pictures of JJ Modis' truck on the property pouring the concrete.
I want to
so
just
we knew.
share that. The next homeowner I have on my timeline is Michelle Aglisi and Joe. And here's a picture of their, when they were building it. And here's young Michelle. And so they knew they had JJ Modis. You knew you had it.
We did.
Pam and Bill Johnson knew they had it. You knew you had it. So, and that's basically what everyone thought in Massachusetts, was that all of it came from JJ Modis. It wasn't really until like Karen Rennie and Richard, when they came forward in Holden, and we're like, whoa, that's way up there. And then Sam Adams in Rutland, Connecticut came forward, and he wasn't the homeowner, he was significant other to the homeowner. And that's when, we started seeing further. And the town Draycott, that's way up there. That's almost like on the New Hampshire border. They had it. So I know when you had the commission, they had like a litmus of a radius, like 20 miles that was all that, for the reimbursement. They were reimbursing homeowners within the 20-mile radius. But then when they had the commission, they spoke about, Lena Halloran came and she said, we have homes that are affected 44 miles from Stafford. So you extended it, the radius. But now I believe it should be all of Mass, because there's more than one quarry. And I know that from the work that I put together on, well, this is you can't really tell, but this is a map of Massachusetts. And there's the 40 towns that are now affected. When Russell first came out, there were only 6 towns. And that was in 2017. And now, 2025, they know of, here's the list, they know of 40 towns. And here's the map. But here's the radius that they originally went by. And here you see Connecticut towns and Massachusetts towns. So Heidi, you built the home, you said, and
yes.
it was close to Lake George, and in one of your interviews, you said that it was a home you built that you wanted to age in.
Correct.
Live there all the way till you passed. And I know Michelle wanted to, when her and Joe retired, Michelle Leglisi,
Glissy.
when they retired, they wanted to sell the home to their son. Everybody's dreams and plans and everything have changed. I know from Connecticut, both my son and my daughter's homes were affected. That's how I got involved. And then I know when they were doing the commission in 2019, their first meeting was May 2019, and then June and July and so on and so forth. They spoke about not many homes going to be affected, because it was only those 6 towns, maybe 10. But now it looks like it's going to turn out that we have 40 towns as well. You have 40 towns. But most of ours is within 10 towns. So we have like a scattered 1 or 2 in East Hartford and maybe 1 in Hebron, whereas we're finding out you have homes, and a lot of them, in each town. And that's because you have a quarry between Holden and Rutland that had peritite in it. So, and from what I heard, it may have had reactive peritite and reactive pyrite.
Peritite is a naturally occurring mineral that experts say, when exposed to air and water, can cause concrete to crack slowly from the inside out.
I looked up a geologist in 1987, looked at all the Massachusetts minerals and fossils. Peter Glib is a geologist out of Dorchester. Am I saying that right?
Yep.
So what I did was I started highlighting the towns, and where you see, those are the towns where there's a quarry or mine, whatever you want to call it, that have things like roe, pyrite, chalcopyrite, galena, dracot, peritite, marcasite, chalcopyrite, magnetite, however you say that too. Rentham,
Brentham.
that too. Pyrite, peritite, sphalerite, galena. I'm not good with all those ites, and there's a lot of them. But there are a lot of places that Mass has that has the pyrite and peritite. Now, are they reactive? That's for a geologist to tell us. But Worcester has pyrite, peritite, chalcopyrite, galena. Those are all very reactive iron sulfide minerals. So I'm thinking Massachusetts is going to have much worse than Connecticut. We only had 1 that we know of. And we also, 2 years before you, passed our quarry standard. So now, old and new have to, that sell their aggregate for concrete. And concrete, people, let me just tell you something. Aggregate's the original sin. I've said this every episode, and this is my 4th. Aggregate is the original sin. Concrete is made up of aggregate, admixtures, cement, and water. And aggregate makes up 70% of that concrete mix. So if you say the host rock, Brimfield schist, shale, in Ireland, it's the mica schist with an abundance of pyrite and peritite. Depending on the rock, the environment, the mineral assemblage, it depends on those things for how reactive it's going to be. So I think the Brimfield schist, Boylston schist, runs up from Connecticut through Mass, through Vermont, up to Canada. And something about the rock texture, I don't know, but where you guys are from, you have a lot of homes that are affected, and they were affected quite quickly. Although Linda Tofolowski's home was built in 1988, and by 1994, she started noticing cracking. Her house cracked so bad, the town officials came and said, listen, you can't live in this house anymore. They had to fix it. So she's what we call a legacy homeowner who repaired prior to us getting a remediation scheme, and through CIFSIC, for homeowners that did repair, they put aside and made them what they call type 2 claimants. And 100, they put aside enough for 100 homeowners to claim back what they expensed at the cap, of course. So for somebody like you, I'm hoping that once they do have a remediation scheme, that they will honor that for legacy homeowners that did the right thing, you know, and so.
Yeah, my understanding is they are including it as of now, but I'm sure the cap will be much lower than 350.
Oh, yeah, yeah. But if it's,
I'd like to get anything.
yes. Well, our cap started at 175, and because of inflation, our superintendent raised it to 190. And we have so many contractors, and Nick can speak to that, that, you know, when the original 100 did it, the price was way high. And they didn't have the equipment, and they didn't have the subcontractors, and they didn't have everything they needed. Like, for instance, Don Childry, one whole neighborhood on day one of the scheme opening, they all got together and filled out the applications. Now, I tried to help my daughter, and we couldn't get on because so many people, you know, rushed. And he was able to set up in one neighborhood. He did all of them. There was like 6 of them. And so that's cost efficient as well. So now the price has come down. And it used to take 3 months, and now contractors are doing it in like 8 weeks.
Yeah.
Because it's been perfected, and there's more lifting companies. At the time, I think there was only Wolf when Don was first doing it, and now there's more lifting companies. Do you know of how many more there are?
I'm going to actually disagree with you. So Sean Payne has been buying up a lot of the companies around here, and he's always been my favorite and my go-to guy.
Okay.
His family's been in the business for, you know, cumulatively over 100 years, you know. So, and they're based out of New Hampshire, and Sean himself, the owner, he is at every house. And
Okay.
He's the one who did my,
Yeah.
he lifted my house.
Sean Payne?
yeah.
Lifted your house?
And now Wolf,
And he does your lifting as well?
he does. I'm not sure if Wolf is going to really do many at all around here anymore. So the trend, from my perspective, has been Sean is dominating and keeping up with it just fine.
Right.
He has 3 or 4 crews. They work 7 days a week. When it's sunny out and the weather's right, they're
Even
working.
lightning.
Yeah, and they'll work till 7 o'clock at night to get the jobs done. They prioritize, you know, this work. They're making sure people are back in their home as fast as possible. That's our priority, you know, getting people
And
back
the
in their home.
average lift of a home, I asked a contractor, and they said it could be anywhere from $25,000 to $35,000 just to lift the home.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, yeah.
And my feeling, and I told this to Eric George, he's the insurance lobbyist for Connecticut.
Yeah.
I said, okay, you may have tightened the language around the insurance policies to abrupt or sudden collapse, but in order to protect the structure, you have to lift it. And I think every homeowner policy insurers should be on the hook for that lift.
Yeah.
If the CIFSIC could subrogate, that costs $35,000 for
Yes.
every home, and we average 200 homes a year repaired. times 35,000 that would go back to SIFSIC, we could do so many more.
Yes.
But they're not in the business to subrogate. It takes a lot to do it, because I did write to them and asked them, can you do that? And unfortunately, they can't. But somebody savvy, like Mass, hasn't gotten anything yet. I really, really emphatically believe they should be on the hook for the lift, because they say we only pay for the structure. Well, you need to protect that structure. And the other thing is, what's happening in Mass is a lot of these homes were built in 84 on up. And that's when they were really tapping into that mineral vein, in the early days. And what happens is, when that peritite oxidizes, second mineral formation occurs. And that, well, it depends on how quickly the peritite oxidizes, and there's different factors for that. And then when the second mineral formation starts, it begins that internal sulfide attack. And the iron goes to rust while the sulfide turns to dust. And you'll see, and I think you described your home, that it was literally just dust. You had inches of it on your basement floor, because it was eating, the internal sulfide attack was eating at the cement paste. And I'm going to mess up how to say this, but the second mineral formation, when you have indications of entigite and thaumasite, the entigite causes the expansion, and the thaumasite causes the loss in strength of the concrete. When we had my son's condo looked at, I had a home inspector, Bill Nail, and he came out and he looked at it and he said, I had this like 3-foot horizontal crack. Rest of it was structural settling cracks, and everything's okay. You just got settling cracks. But he was concerned about that, and it was 2010. Nobody was talking about, because they didn't put out the warnings in 2008, like Department of Consumer Protection said they would when Don Childry came. So he said, let's do a Windsor probe test. And they shot into the cement and concrete, and they said, the PSI, it's a little low, but it's still within the range. So you're okay to buy the condo. And I went right to the condo association. I said, there is something wrong with the wall. And they said, don't worry about it. It's a common area. We'll pay to have your foundation repaired, not knowing that the whole 6 units would have to be lifted or anything like that, and not knowing that there were 124 units in this 204 unit complex. Most of the whole complex, 17 buildings were affected, and all 17 of them had to be repaired. We were, of course, excluded in the beginning, even though I was there from day one fighting for homeowners, for PUD owners, for condo owners. October 2018, when they had the meeting initiating the program, they said condos over 4 units were excluded. Well, the Condo 5 group that I had formed in 2018, every one of them had 6 or 8 units on one structure. So it meant condos were excluded. So I fought to get them included, and they finally let us in July of 2019, but by then they had, with the condos, 1,112 homes applicants. They ran out of money. They had to close the doors. But my daughter found out the end of August. 6 days later, they closed the doors to SIFSIC. Unfortunately, we found out on the day they were bringing the twins home from the NICU, because they were born 1 pound 9 ounces, so they were there for 3 months. and it was supposed to be a day of joy. But my husband, we walked by the utility room and the door was open. It's a finished basement. It's a big, beautiful, very expensive house, gorgeous home. Never would have imagined, because it was built in 1998 in my neighborhood. I don't have it. All the homes around me are 65 and up. And I couldn't even be there to welcome home the twins because I was crying. As soon as I saw the map cracking, I dropped to my knees and I just hysterically bawled because it was, oh my God, I just got my son's condo in the remediation scheme finally after fighting all the way till July 2019. And 1 month later, my daughter's home and they closed the door 6 days later. So we had to wait until January 2020 when they opened up a pending claimant, and she had to pend all the way until last summer. So it's been a long, arduous road, but you guys would know about that because, as I mentioned, 2017 is when you had the public awareness. 2018, you were interviewed, Michelle was interviewed. And then on June 12th, 2018, 2 years after we started our coalition, MRACC was born. And Russell, you and Michelle were the founders, co-founders of it. And then 2018, you had meetings, raising awareness. By 2019, Russell, you were part of it. The special commission.
Yes.
And
The governor
Massachusetts.
set it up.
Pardon?
The governor set it up.
Yes. So there were two things in 2018 that you raised for a bill. That was the testing program, and Senator Goby asked for 100,000, but they only set aside 50. And but that passed. They allowed a testing program. And they also established a special commission, and the study shall include examination of the degree to which concrete foundations are crumbling due to the presence of peritite in the Commonwealth. And it's from Roman numeral 1 till 7. And they held their first meeting May 13th, 2019. And during it, they talked about what the charge was in their first meeting. So they didn't have anybody present at it. Russell, you were there along with Michelle at that first meeting. And the state's attorney general's office, let's see, Gabrielle Viator? She was from the state's attorney general's office. And I'm going to keep bringing that up because I know that Senator Eric Lesser spoke or sent information over to the Attorney General, Mara Healy. And Russell wrote to the Attorney General, as well as Connecticut. We sent the Attorney General our report on the causation of prematurely deteriorating defective concrete foundations. So I'm bringing that up because I want folks to know how many times people reached out to the now Governor Healy, and we'll get to that in 2024, and you guys can speak to what happened and how you felt, because I know I was devastated when in 2024 the Home Act didn't include crumbling foundations. Anyways, they had their first meeting. They talked about what they needed to divide and form subcommittees. By the second meeting, they had Lena Halloran, the Connecticut Department of Housing homeowner advocate. She urged that they recognize the problem extends beyond the initial 20-mile radius. Executive Director of Mass Concrete and Aggregate Producer Associations, Craig Dufosse, noted that they would go 35 to 40 miles depending on the direction and the route. In July 2019, the third meeting of the Special Commission was held at Munson Town Hall, and the presentation was by Steve Mabey, the State of Mass geologist, and he discussed the possible locations of peritite in the Commonwealth and the different testing methodologies that could be employed by UMass Lab. October 7th, 2019, they had the fourth meeting of the Special Commission at Munson, and during that, the presentation was by Michael McGlaris, the superintendent of our captive insurance called CIFSIC Incorporated. And he explained that 27 states have statutory framework to allow captive insurance companies. Massachusetts does not. CIFSIC is structured that it could cover crumbling foundations in other states within 90 days of the state passing enabling legislation. And he explained the Connecticut program. The fifth meeting on 11/18/2019, the commission would conclude their report by the end of December 2019 and use the public hearing to unveil their findings and recommendations to the public. The public hearing will be scheduled for January 2022, likely held at the Memorial Hall in town of Munson. The final report had 10 recommendations to consider. So then we get to January 2020. And I know a lot of people are thinking about this. 2020, wasn't that when COVID hit? You're right. So they only had one meeting in 2020, and that was on 1/8/2020. Massachusetts estimates $350 million needed to fix approximately 2,000 homes. The commission also recommends that Mass follow Connecticut's lead and create a captive insurance corporation to handle payouts to affected homeowners. Called for an enhanced training program for home inspectors, town tax assessors, and real estate professionals, and for the state to continue reimbursing homeowners for visual inspections and reimbursing homeowners at a rate of 75% for testing of 2 core samples up to $5,000. The commission recommended that lawmakers require that all Mass home sellers disclose to prospective buyers any testing, inspection, or repair performed on the foundation. Town fears that their property tax base will erode along with the concrete if homeowners who can't finance the repair simply walk away. And then there was an article on 2/13/2020, mineral and concrete puts houses at risk. We think for Massachusetts, there's probably 1,500 homes affected, Goby said. Ann Goby, Eric Lesser, both senators, and Brian Ash, representative of the Commonwealth, those three have been ardent advocates for the affected homeowners. They've been at every meeting, and Senator Ann Goby pushed for the testing program. She pushed for the special commission. As a matter of fact, she co-chaired it with Brian Ash. They had 14 members, but as far as I counted, it was usually 12 that showed up, and some showed up via through Skype or Microsoft Teams or whatever, but there was usually always 12 members at each meeting, and it included people from the state legislators, also Russell and Michelle, and also folks from realty and bankers. And also the concrete industry was involved, Greg DuFont, who I spoke of earlier. So 2020 COVID hits the United States with shutdowns across Mass. So now we're into 2021. On 12/8/2021, crumbling concrete may be cause for concern for Grafton homeowners. Now they're starting to see more and more towns through the testing program is what initially sparked that, because prior to that, Michelle, was begging people to come forward. But once the testing program was available, and the radius was extended out, more and more homeowners took advantage of that. And so far, peritite has been detected in nearly 2,000 homes in central Mass, including Grafton and Holden. Senate Bill 548 was created in part after Goby served as co-chair on the Special Commission to study the financial and economic impacts of crumbling concrete. In its January 2020 report, the commission estimated $350 million.
So when we did that, I thought it was 2,500 homes, but we were basing that just on Becker's.
Yes.
We weren't basing that on all.
Yeah,
the other
they
ones.
said 2,000, and then
Yeah.
Craig said it's more like 1,500. So Senator Ann Goby, said nearly 2,000. So yeah.
They were using. So at the time, though, when they were coming up with those figures, it was based on the radius that didn't make sense, even for Becker's, really. So now we know there's other quarries. So those numbers were so far off,
Yes.
Ultimately.
Yes. Yes. On 1/4/2022, we're in the year 2022 now, the Joint Committee held a public hearing with U.S. Congressman Richard Neal supporting Senate Bill 548, as well as state officials from the state of Connecticut. I was there as well, doing my testimony. Deborah McCoy, Sue Toomey, and state and town officials from Mass, affected homeowners from Mass, such as Michelle Laglisi, Russell Dupere, Heidi Hammer, Karen Rene, Mike Malinese, Karen Bellotti, David Wells, Shannon Boyce, and so on and so forth. Even Stephen Mabey sent in written testimony supporting Senate Bill 548. On 113, Goby's bill to help residents plagued by peritite gets a hearing. And it talks about Rebecca Rosh. Listen to the testimony given by U.S. Congressman Richard Neal. On 7/28/2022, Governor Charles Baker submits a letter to the Senate and House of Representatives concerning Section 13, establish a new requirement for quarry operators producing concrete aggregate for use in foundations. He agreed that there should be quarry standards, but he didn't want to have it go through the Department of Environmental Protection. He felt that it should stay with Mass DOT, similar to New York. New York DOT handles all the testing, and they have what they call an aggregate approval list. And what happens is either they accept it, reject it, or limit the uses, depending on the total sulfur tests. And so Mass, although because I worked with Steve Mabey, Margaret Thomas, our Connecticut State, and Nick Scaglione, Ohio geologist, and myself, and we worked on it for the whole year, 2022, getting the language right. And they said, okay, we're not going to do what you did in Connecticut, having it go through the Department of Environmental Protection and the state geologists. We're going to have it go through Mass DOT. They're better equipped, and Steve Mabey, the geologist, will confer with them. So now it brings me to Nick. In the fall of 2022, you were doing a home in Rutland, Mass. And I was like, Rutland, Mass, Holden, Mass, this is way out of the radius for Stafford. There's no way that concrete wouldn't be hard by the time it got that far up. So I contacted you, and you said, well, contact the owner of the home and ask him.
Yep.
So I reached out to Sam Adams, although he's not the owner, he was living there. And I said, can I please have the contractor remove some of that concrete that he can bring to me? And he said, sure. So I met Nick in Tolland, and he had a whole bunch of it because he had some for Yukon and some for me. and I explained to him that I was going to send it to the Ohio geologist in Ohio, Nick Scaglione, who had boots on the ground in 2008 in Connecticut, and he also came to Connecticut in 2018 when I hired him to come, and we shut down the state of Connecticut. We had all the state officials, all the town leaders, all the department heads, federal delegates, everybody at this meeting. And Nick, and he also told me to invite all the concrete heads, so which I did. And the room was packed. There was actually an overflow room. And for 2 hours, he explained it, and the concrete industry said, that was the best presentation we've had. So I sent it to Nick, and he contacted me, and he said, Debbie, you sent me some from Wellington, Connecticut, aggregate, removed defective concrete, and you sent me some from Rutland. I looked at both, and the stuff from Rutland is not the same as Becker's Quarry. There has to be another quarry in Mass. Now, there were rumors, innuendo, there's got to be another quarry. No one confirmed it. And so a week later, Nick was, he was hired sooner than that, but a week later, there was a forum in Auburn, Massachusetts that I was invited to. Sue was invited to, Sue Toomey. Nick Hany was invited to. We all spoke at it, but Nick Scaglione was the keynote speaker of that meeting. Massachusetts Crumbling Foundation Forum in Auburn, keynote speaker Nick Scaglione, president of Concrete Research and Testing. He's a geologist and photographer. He presented on the effects of reactive peritite and aggregate used in concrete. He's got 30 years experience in testing concrete and concrete aggregates. He did a forum in Connecticut. He's examined 650 cores from 300 residential foundations in Connecticut, Mass. He is also involved in the research in Ireland. So it was at that meeting, he had a map of Massachusetts, and he was showing all the places, dots for all the towns. And he said, right there, Rutland and Holden and Rutland, right there, there's a quarry that has peritite, reactive pyrite peritite. So, and at that forum, Senator Goby was there, Steve Mabey was there. I brought the new geologist for the state of Connecticut, Margaret Seymour. Anyways, we were all there. My husband was there, a whole bunch of us. And first Nick spoke, then I got up and spoke, Sue spoke, Nick spoke, and a realtor got up and spoke as well. And after the meeting, I walked up to them and I said, isn't this good to know? So get rid of that radius litmus test. It's all of Massachusetts should be able to avail to the reimbursement for testing. We want to know in Mass, how far does it go? Because in Draycott, I was able to see that in Draycott that a nickel mine, there's peritite, marcasite, chalcopyrite, magnetite, scattered piles of waste. So is it in a quarry in Draycott, or is it a quarry coming from New Hampshire? You've got it from Connecticut, New Hampshire, Rhode Island. I mean, there's a lot of places that Mass could be getting it from. So that's a concern. So now we get to 2023. 1/1/2023, Governor Maura Haley starts her administration with a promise to address the housing crisis in Mass. On 1/10/2023, Senator Ann Goby presents to the Senate and House of Representatives petition for the adoption of an act to establish standards for quarry licensing and the testing of pyrite and peritite minerals. And also for GSRs, geological source reports, aggregate testing to identify the presence of pyrite Parasite required in subsection B shall include, but not limited to, a total sulfur test to measure total sulfur content and a representative sample. The Secretary of Transportation or designee, in consultation with the state geologist, shall review each license application submitted and notify each applicant whether the license has been approved and any applicable conditions of operations. By 3/1/2023, through Article 87, which created a new Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities and renamed the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development to Executive Office of Economic Development, with the realignment providing a better position to promote economic growth. On 4/10/2023, there was a public hearing joint committee on Environment and Natural Resources, Senate Bill 495, funding for repairs and quarry standards. The quarry standards passed, but the funding did not make the cut in 2023. Both bills passed the state Senate as amendments to the budget. They waited for approval from the House and Governor. On 5/22/23, mass.gov, Healy Driscoll administration announces Massachusetts Senator Ann Goby as Director of Rural Affairs. Senator Ann Goby will join their administration as the new Director of Rural Affairs in the Executive Office of Economic Development. She will ensure that the needs of the rural and regional economies are incorporated into the economic development. Our office supports all of Massachusetts' 351 cities and towns, more than half of which are rural communities. On 6/5/2023, Senator Goby starts her new role as a member of the Executive Office of Economic Development Economic Foundation team led by Undersecretary Ashley Stolba. She will serve as a member of the Rural Policy Commission, which advocates for the vitality of rural communities as well as legislative and policy solutions that address rural needs. On 8/9/2023, Governor Maura Healey submits a letter to the Senate and House of Reps, fully supports the establishing a new department with the Mass DOT, a new licensure process for quarries. As we work to replenish our housing supply, we must ensure that construction is completed with quality materials. Establishing an efficient and meaningful licensing program will require time. Mass DOT will need more than 5 months to establish a new department. Delaying the effective date of this proposal to July 1st, 2024 will allow Mass DOT to complete the actions in an orderly way and effectively achieve the aims of the new law. On October 18th, 2023, Governor Healey announces the filing of the Affordable Home Act. On 1/1/24 until 7/30/24, lawmakers discuss Affordable Home Act and including a financial aid remediation scheme for affected homeowners. However, the Senate passed the legislation unanimously, but the House of Representatives did not. A letter was written to Governor Healey. Given the severity and widespread nature of this issue, we respectfully request that you exercise the authority granted to you by Amendment 56 of the Mass State Constitution to address this crisis. Specifically, we ask you to add the Crumbling Concrete Assistance Program to the Affordable Home Act. We have attached the language of the amendment that the state Senate passed 39-0. 2024, August 6, Governor Healey signs the Affordable Home Act into law. This historic legislation authorizes $5.16 billion in spending over the next 5 years, along with 50 policy initiatives to counter rising housing costs caused by high demand and limited supplies. One such initiative is Massachusetts Healthy Homes Program that creates a program to address habitability habitability concerns in homes. Are they habitable? Including lead paint, asbestos, and mold abatement. Note, crumbling foundations was taken out of the Healthy Home Program, leaving homeowners devastated. October 15, 2024, parasitic legislation in Massachusetts, the Northeastern State Materials Engineer Association, the 100th annual meeting, Springfield, Mass, by Mass DOT, presenters Richard Mulkey and Jason Robertson. October 2024, affected homeowners visited the State House holding a press conference and visiting the Office of Representatives, telling their stories regarding their journey to raise awareness and getting their hopes up in 2024 that this would be the year foundation programs would be implemented, led by Michelle Leglisi with many affected homeowners. And right now, 2025, January 2025 to March 2025, reintroducing legislation regarding a financial aid package and another trip to the State House to implore representatives to do the right thing, as homeowners have been raising awareness since 2017 to 2025, going into their 8th year with no remediation scheme. Meanwhile, Connecticut has repaired over 1,080 houses in this time frame. So I'd like to bring it back to you, Heidi. I'm sorry Russell Dupere had to leave. So I'd like to bring it back to you, Heidi, because I know all that I've put into fighting for Mass, what her excluding the crumbling Connecticut, I mean the crumbling foundation assistant program was like a kick in the teeth, a punch in the gut, however you want to call it. What did you feel as an affected homeowner knowing that that was pulled at the last minute?
There really aren't words to describe how you feel. After you work so hard, you have all these people in the news stations into your home, showing them, pleading for assistance, writing, calling, developing this group, having awareness meetings, and to just be let down, that we meant nothing,
Yeah.
that we are nothing.
Because that bill said, when they interviewed her later, it said it had something for everyone. It was $5.16 billion over a 5-year time period, and they were building new houses, and they were also, what's the word? Rehabbing other homes.
Right,
And yet
rehabilitating.
they said that it was more of an economic issue for you and not a safety issue. And that would bring you in, Nick, because it is a safety issue.
100%.
These homes, after 30 years,
Yeah.
they don't stop. They call it a long, it's not a sudden, like FEMA said, no, it's not a sudden issue, it's a long-term issue. Long-term left the train station a long time ago because after 10, 20, 30 years, you go into some of these homes and they're really bad.
Oh, yeah.
Some of them should be condemned.
I have videos of me just dragging my fingertips across the concrete and it's just falling apart as if it was wet paste. I mean, it's just falling apart.
Have you ever been into Mike Melanese's home?
Mike's got the worst
in
house I've
Mass?
seen. It's
Yes,
unbelievable.
the worst I've
and-
ever seen, other than Ireland.
How
They
can
have
they
the
turn him
worst in
down?
the world. But
Yeah.
I don't even know how he does it, And they don't just have the crumbling, concrete.
Mm-hmm.
When it starts expansively cracking like that, doesn't it lift it up off the footing?
It
and
lifts, but then it
shifts the
bows inward.
house?
So, like,
Yes, the
especially
wall
in
is
Mike's
caving
house,
in
it's
to the
bowing
pressure.
in some cases 5 inches out of plumb from top to bottom. I mean, you can see it. You
Yeah.
don't have to be an engineer. You
No.
walk in there, you see it. You're like,
You
I
see
gotta get out of
the
here.
wall
Yeah.
bowing. Yeah, my
It's
son's
unbelievable.
condo was bowing like that too.
Yep.
What started out like this,
Yeah.
3 feet, it became the whole length of the wall
Yeah.
by the time they came in 2016 and did the tests on the condo.
I've said this before, and it's unfortunate, and I feel so bad for our neighbors in Massachusetts. I really do. But it's going to have to come to a point where some people walk away from their homes, and the banks start inheriting these homes, and the towns start inheriting the tax burden.
Yeah.
When the towns start feeling the pinch of this, then some action will happen. Unfortunately, it's going to mean some people have to walk away from the equity they have in their home.
Yeah. We had at least 500
Yeah.
foreclosures, and most of them were condo owners. As
Yeah.
soon as they found out they were excluded,
Yep.
so many of them walked away.
Yeah.
So many unit
And
owners
that gets
walked
attention.
away.
That gets attention.
Yes.
When the bank owns a bunch of properties and they're vacant, and that gets attention.
Yeah.
Taxes aren't getting paid at that point.
Right.
That gets attention. You start hurting your local towns with tax revenue, that gets attention.
And Vernon, our town, hardest hit.
Yeah.
But I know you guys were absolutely devastated.
We were.
I could see it in your face because in 2023, when she was elected, you had a supermajority in the House, a supermajority in the Senate, and you had a Democrat governor.
Yep.
And then she just poo-pooed it and said, "Yeah, I heard about it, and so I heard something about it early on in 2017." And they said, "But these homeowners have been fighting for 7 years. What,
They're fighting so hard.
I'll have to go back and talk to the legislators, and and they also get mold all
yeah.
over the walls.
Yeah.
Very bad black mold.
as soon as you get
My
your first
daughter's
crack, you
home
get
had
water.
mold
Yeah.
very badly.
Yep.
And so, the cracking. So here they have mold abatement, and they use the term healthy home because that's what we have a surcharge, $12 a year, and it's called the healthy home surcharge. And in Mass, they said healthy home, and it was for everything but crumbling foundations. And now here we are in 2025. How much longer can they do that to you guys? I mean, I have survivor's guilt, that here both my children's homes are fixed now, and you don't have your home fixed. And you were one of the first people to be interviewed
It's
in March of
outrageous.
2018. And yet you are still, and the clock is ticking. And the internal sulfite attack is still going on. And Nick, you were going to say something. I know I have to wrap it up, but Nick, you were going to say something about
Yes.
when you go as a contractor and the finished basements, when you remove that.
Yeah,
what do you
Russell's story reminded me of. He bought a home with a finished basement, and this goes to the realty side of things. Right now people are buying homes. The market's hot. You see a basement's all finished, like wow, look at all that space. Well, there's a basement behind those finished walls. There's concrete behind those walls, and 99% of the time, that's where it is the worst. The worst I've ever seen is when I tear down a finished basement and I look behind that wall. Spider cracks everywhere.
Yeah.
And there's a link here. There's a link here. When you're trapping moist air and you're not getting air circulation, it accelerates the process.
Yes, I've heard that from geologists that say when you trap it,
Yep.
that air stays in there. And the more cracking, the more oxygen and water gets in.
Yep.
And then you have rodents coming in because there's homes you can put your hand through and rodents and snakes and your basement floods.
Yep.
I'm telling you, Governor Mara Haley, please listen to me today. You need to do the right thing. You need to get a remediation scheme for these homeowners in Mass. They deserve it. And that ends it for me today. Thank you, Heidi.
Thank you,
Thank
Thank you, Nick.
Thanks for
And
having
Thank
me.
you, Russell. That ends our episode for today.